when we look at the future of education, we really think about what are we doing now to best prepare students for their futures. And we really need to think about what we as educators are changing to support the change in the world. And here at ICS, what we're looking at is a hub model.
So at ICS, we have a definition of learning, and we really understand that for learning to be as effective as possible, learning needs to be collaborative, reflective, meaningful, active, personalized, conceptual, transdisciplinary, and authentic. And in our research as a school, what we're finding is that these learning communities, or sometimes they might be called hubs, spaces where students come together and teachers come together to learn about different ideas, is really kind of the epitome of our learning definition of learning. It's a space where learning is collaborative and co-constructed.
So when you're part of a community as a student, first of all, you feel you have the sense of being part of it. But it's also that it really means you're breaking down the walls a bit. So when you are looking at, as a student or as a human being, when you are looking at the world and you're trying to make sense of the world, you're really making sense through many different pieces. You don't look at the world and understand the world in very isolated ways. Right now, we have an environment model, so to speak, in the middle school, where we have a math room and we have an English room and we have a science room. But when we think about how we learn and the ways that we connect between disciplines to understand what we're learning and understand the world, it makes sense to sort of break down the walls and the boundaries a bit so that we can make these transdisciplinary connections and interdisciplinary connections that are so important. So by opening up the classrooms and building communities where students in a grade level, or maybe even across grade levels, are working together in a community, along with, of course, the teachers as facilitators, it will bring in this sense of community where everyone is learning together, but of course learning together at different paces and maybe even learning different things at different times.
One of the negative stigmas attached to a learning community model or a hub model really comes from the 70s, where where there was such a thing as the open concept classroom. And if you walked into a classroom in that environment, you had really students learning whatever they wanted to learn, whenever they wanted to learn, however they needed to learn it. But this is very different than that. We have absolute clarity as to what we want students to know, understand, and be able to do. We also know what evidence we are going to accept for a child to demonstrate that they have learned that. What is different is the flexibility for a child to progress through that continuum at their own pace.
When you think back to your education or my education, I was just sitting in rows. And what was I doing? I was listening. This is very passive learning. My task was to write down what they said, memorize it, and then write it back down when they asked me in a test. Okay? This supports none of the skills that we want to prepare students for. When you think about what we're trying to do with students and help them, you have to think about what we value in education. In education, of course, learning is key. That's everything. We want to maximize learning for students.
We want to make sure that we are giving students access and support as they work towards our curriculum standards and our goals for them. But we also want to do that in a way that honors the research that we have now about learning in the brain, and in a way that is personalized and meaningful and authentic for the students that are here with us in Ethiopia.
If you look at some of the companies that are seen as the best companies in the world today, they have moved to, in essence, a learning community model, a hub model. If you walk into a Google office space, the idea that there are individual offices or siloed spaces for individuals to work, those days are gone. Why? Because we want to provide an opportunity for the adults and the children to collaborate across traditional boundaries, and creating that open learning environment, that open learning community, in some ways it encourages the kind of learning that we want to see in our kids today.